In plain sight, under the indifferent gaze of the Major League office in the Dominican Republic, MLB, the Major League team, the Texas Rangers, cheat and run over child athletes who dream of one day becoming professional ball players.
In the beginning, Mike Daly and Will Espinal will greet me every time they visited the field and say things like, "We can't wait to have you with us, and you're almost there." And then one day, when I was in the dugout, they arrived and said nothing. No greetings, no words of encouragement. All I got was a cold shoulder. Before, they had told me that he belongs to them, that they saw him as a Texas player, saying that he was a Ranger. I was staying at their complex with other players they took under their protection. They took us all to Troncoso's house in Romana, and I really thought I had made it.
But too many Major League teams like the Texas Rangers come to the Dominican Republic looking for the island's top talent. And they have built a system where they harness their economic power against disadvantaged families. Families like the Lirianos.
You are destroying a family. You are destroying their dreams. I mean, the entire family's future was based on that boy being signed and making it to the major leagues. Now they are facing legal problems and have issues with people who lend them money. It's also very destructive to the player himself. It's going to be difficult for him to even play again because, in his mind, he went from being a selected player with a verbal arrangement to be shunned by the organization. And that's another thing. I think that teams' pre-selection of players via verbal arrangement 2 years prior should be eliminated. That way, it will reduce the risk to families with children seeking arrangements that later do not materialize. I have seen this many times in the past, and it's very sad. The athlete plays not just because he loves to play, but out of the necessity of getting his family out of a bad situation and into a better life. Because when a player gets that agreement, even if it's a verbal contract, they feel like their lives will change. That their old life of poverty and hunger, it's now behind him.
What happened to the Texas Rangers investment destined for Fidel Liriano? To which hands did that money go? What happened to the contract for this Dominican child? Who was with Liriano in the Texas Rangers complex when he was just 14 years old?
This didn't happen because of my performance. I was one of the best of my class. I feel there must have been some other reason.
Was it Ray Davis, the owner of the Texas Rangers, who decided to breach the verbal contract? Or were the employees responsible for making that decision? According to the employees, all the decisions for the signing of players comes from the management. That means directly from Ray Davis and his president of operations, John Daniels. After Liriano's family and his trainer decided to take legal action, the Texas Rangers made some moves with their employees, according to a source confirmed to InsideTheRanger.com. The former assistant general manager, Mike Daly, the lead author of the Leonardo case, was unexpectedly moved to the San Diego Padres, leaving behind more than 15 years of service to the Texas Rangers.
The issue here is that, looking at it from a legal point of view, there is some sort of crime in action. It's a very difficult and hazardous situation for these families. And the Republic does not prohibit these teams from behaving in this manner because baseball is a huge business, with hundreds of millions of pesos from the MLB being filtered into the country's economy. But the thing is that he is a boy, a child, and so he belongs to the state and should be protected.
In a statement in the digital newspaper Dario Libre, MLB executive Omar Minaya recognizes verbal contracts with children as young as 12 and 13 years old. In the same news article, it also states that 16 and 18-year-olds are being discarded because they're considered too old.
If all goes well for a player, on July the 2nd you get paid. All is good, and there is lots of joy. The player gets their name in the newspaper and suddenly the dream is realized. But on the other hand, when you're not selected after being made to believe that you were, there will seem to be some sort of malpractice going on that, unfortunately, no one dares to talk about to avoid harming the business. The scouts go to the training fields to check on the players, gifted young players with promising futures, and offer them to pre-sign with the teams. Amounts are established and prior negotiations are settled, making the player unreachable to other teams' offers.
Every time a major league team reneges on verbal contracts, kids get sidelined. No other organization will make them an offer, and even worse, at that age, their market value is reduced to zero. Would the Major League Draft be the salvation of the baseball children of the Dominican Republic? These young prospects like Liriano are victims of verbal contracts by teams like the Texas Rangers. Are you aware that it is a custom, almost a routine, that major league teams choose, reserve, or set aside children from a very early age?
After the player is pre-selected, they have to go wherever they are asked. At that point, they are working for the team. Countless times we went to provide assistance at other sports centers where players of his class were being reviewed, even though they weren't allowed to enter due to being underage.
During Liriano's contract with the Texas Rangers, active personnel from that organization were in charge of all the signings that year. Here are those involved: Mike Daly, Rafik Saab, Willie Espinal, Giancarlos Alvarez, Danilo Troncoso, Hamilton Weiss, Jack Marino, Jesus Chu Alabi.
There is a difference between a 10-year-old and a 14-year-old kid. Even if it's okay for them to play and compete, there should be a level of fairness to it.
Even as young as 9, children in the Dominican Republic are forced to leave school, to give up their childhood, to leave their families, all because of this system of the major league teams. It's a common practice for the teams to use contracts with children as young as 11 and 13 years old. This is obviously very unfair compared to the system in the United States.
For starters, in the US, the rules of the game dictates that you must be in school to be eligible. The teams can't take you out of school. It's only after the players have completed their high school education that they are presented with the opportunity of signing with a team, even if they were scouted while in school. The difference between the Dominican player and the US player is that the Dominican player has to drop everything, including their schooling, to fully dedicate all of its time to develop his skills in baseball.
What will happen to these Dominican children and their families?
You feel betrayed as a father, with no support from the state and no major league agreement.
Cruel people like Mike Daly and his team should pay the consequences. With racist attitudes against Latinos, this only adds to the list of obstacles to the children. An abusive organization like the Texas Rangers with irresponsible executives who do not care about the well-being of the Dominican children they employ is just shameful.
I just pray to God for this situation to be over.
It's a social crime, youth suicide. That's what it is. Who will think that the owner of a team could have such a lack of sensibility and lack of humanity that he will act in such a way that will allow a contract to be offered to a family and then taken away? The MLB office states that they can't contract children, but that is exactly what they are doing by contracting 11, 12, and 13 years old.
Massive protests should be generated demanding respect for the Dominican minor. This could be a cause for massive protests, similar to those that erupted in the United States over Colin Kaepernick, George Floyd, and the Jacko Black cases.
Similar to the protests of George Floyd and other cases that highlighted the abuse of power, racism, and discrimination, we need to rise up against these practices.
It's like they know the loopholes of the law. They look for a legal technical flaw and know how to use it to avoid directly violating the law while taking advantage of how permissive the Dominican ways are in order to achieve their goals.
This damage reaches deep into the bowels of many Dominican homes. Would Ray Davis be responsible for such abuse?
MLB reported that from 2015 to 2019, they had 21,543 Dominican boys ready to be signed, not to mention the ones that passed July the 2nd in 2014 or on the following years. They signed a total of 2,752 boys, leaving 17,991 Dominicans without a school education, chasing after a dream that will never happen. That is social damage. The U.S. player, having another culture and working protection, they search for other ways to finish their studies in the case of not making it to the Major League.
Will the Major League draft avoid the trouble ahead?
During my stay there, they presented me the ones that signed me up. There was Jack Marino, John Daniels, one called Hamilton. There were rumors that the owner of the team was there. Mike Daly was there, Willie Espinal, and Giancarlo Alvarez, nicknamed La Mantequilla.
The Texas Rangers, represented by their executives, had the audacity to supervise the progress of Liriano for 2 years, only to later fail to comply with the agreement, leaving the Dominican boy hanging in the air, frustrated, and a family totally burdened with economic duties.
The draft in the U.S. works perfectly because it has rules and regulations. If you made a promise and said that you will sign up a player, you must follow up with this player in an obligatory manner.
As Julio Lugo says, the custom of the system in the United States is to follow up on the player, just like the Rangers did with Liriano. But in this case, Texas did not comply with the agreement, revealing bad principles and poor moral values.
Are we surprised that top executives and owners like Ray Davis support this inhumane practice of scouting poor kids, giving them hope and then leaving them completely devastated?
So, if a verbal contract is presented to the player at 14 years old, the independent trainer will state that he needs to take the player from his mother at 11 years of age, since he has only 3 years to prep him up for the league, teaching him how to grab the bat, to play his position, how to run, and how to understand the game mentality. 3 years and a half is not enough time for a kid to bottle this in his head. This is abusive. Then, the cherry on top, the team says, I just signed up Fernando Tatis Jr. for $340 million in order for him not to walk away. I have a problem. I can't pay you what we agreed on. That's not my problem, nor my player. You got in debt, that's your problem.
The top executives of the Texas Rangers refuse to answer all these questions. They do not receive us in their facilities, where we only find closed doors. Now more questions arise. Was our written request via WhatsApp reported to the Rangers management? Ignoring our calls, was it a local decision or was it a decision of Ray Davis and John Daniels, the top Texas executives? Why do they hide and refuse to talk about the Leonardo case? It is a constant in the Dominican Republic that the professional baseball industry chooses its next players from the age of 11 on. Children settling in schools after perfecting their skills to play baseball, trapped in a system of tangles of disguised dreams that end up being a nightmare.
We want answers. We are not given any. We want justice. We have none. We want to be heard. Still, they refuse us.
First of all, this is a U.S. business. The U.S. player, having another culture and working protection, they search for other ways to finish their studies in the case of not making it to the major leagues. But here, this does not exist. My solution? Simple. Let's do it just like the U.S. does. You cover the studies of the boys, and you sign them up at 17. You prep them academically for the future because when the study habit is lost at 13 or 14 years old, it's very difficult to study again when the 17-year-old mark is passed.